Hey y'all, Loud Little Ducky. Today we are going to be breaking down the Canton police audit. Y'all know it's in. Let's just do a read through of it. And if I need to, I will break out specific parts of this and make a separate video. So, Town of Canton, Massachusetts, independent on-site audit of the Town of Canton Police Department. It is for the fiscal years of 2015 through 2025, so the past 10 years. And then the date of the inspection was from November 18th, 2024 through March 30th, 2025. It says the independent audit of the Town of Canton Police Department, Five Stone Intelligence, 5SI, is the one that conducted this, was tasked with auditing the Canton Police Department in accordance with the scope of work order detailed within. 5SI's report does not make any findings of fact or conclusions of law regarding ongoing criminal investigations or pending legal matters involving the Canton Police Department. So that's like the first thing that they say in this. But they end up making some conclusions and findings of fact. So something they said they were not going to do, they end up doing. And maybe that was part of them being hired that they would put this in there. I don't know what the contract looked like, but they don't stick to that. They could have just been non-biased, but there was some bias showing. But they are ex-law enforcement, so it's easy to side with law enforcement, I guess. But they do call them out on things too. It's good and bad for both sides. So March 30th, 2025 says, Dear Police Audit Committee, on behalf of Five Stones, we are presenting our review of the Canton Police Department's adherence to policies and procedures as further detailed in the scope of service agreement. Since November of 2024, 5SI has partnered with Canton town officials, the Canton PD, and Canton residents to identify, evaluate, and recommend structural and systemic improvements that the Canton PD can implement to achieve a shared vision of safe, effective, and transparent law enforcement of the town of Canton. And if that's all you would have done, that would have been great. But you added some remarks in there. Our report is the product of constructive collaboration between Canton town stakeholders and the public and Canton PD. The cooperation, transparency, and efforts of the Canton PD, specifically its leadership, are a testimony to the power of collaborative change. We look forward to sharing our findings and our continued work with you to support the implementation of our recommendations. 5SI's audit included the evaluation of the department's organizational culture, policies, procedures, regulations, crime scene protocols, professional standards and accountability, organizational structure and governance, citizens' privacy protections, management and operations, hiring and training standards, citizen complaints, the internal affairs process, evidence handling and processing, financial resources and budgeting, and the effectiveness and transparency of the department. Our final report has identified opportunities for improvement in several areas and other key recommendations as set forth in the attached report. We would like to express our gratitude to the leadership and members of the Canton PD for their cooperation and support. They have been receptive to our engagement and have collaborated closely with our team to provide the necessary information and resources to gain insight into the department's operations and develop actionable recommendations for an enhancement. Additionally, the Canton PD has embraced the suggestion put forth by 5SI and are actively working towards the implementation of recommendations which can be effectively executed. We appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with you in reshaping public safety in the town of Canton. It is our honor for us to assist you in your efforts to foster a secure and efficient law enforcement environment for both police force and communities they serve. Sincerely, Five Stone Intelligence. Then it's got the table of contents. If you want to read that, you may. You can pause here and read the table of contents some more, and we are going to get into the executive summary. All right, so the Town of Canton, Massachusetts, and Special Police Audit Committee selected Five Stones Intelligence to conduct an independent police audit of Canton Police Department in November of 2024. Our audit team conducted a thorough review of the scope of work and detailed areas which review including crime scene protocols, professional standards, accountability process, organizational structure, and other operational aspects. The audit included a financial review of overtime expenditures, asset forfeitures expenditures, and police detail finances. The residents of Canton commissioned the police audit following the tragic death of a town resident, Boston Police Officer John O'Keefe, on January 29, 2022. The community seeks to comprehensively assess the department's strengths and identify areas where improvements can be made. The audit was conducted from November 18, 2024 to March 30, 2025, reviewing activities spanning from the fiscal years of 2015 to March 2025 of Canton PD. The 5SI team members were present on site for approximately 12 weeks, evaluating day-to-day operations, department's adherence to internal policies and procedures, as well as compliance and applicable laws and regulations, including Massachusetts general laws and local bylaws. Over the following several months, 5SI conducted interviews of all members of Canton Police Department, including over 40 police officers and other town employees. Many of the interviews were completed under the condition of anonymity. As part of the inquiry, our team examined more than 98 policies, procedures, rules, and regulations. Recommendations were put forward in various aspects of the project, such as professional standards, civilian grievances and accountability, crime scene protocols, advanced training, and compliance with the Massachusetts Police Accreditation Commission. In conducting this audit, we received a full cooperation from Chief Helena Rafferty and other members of the police department and town employees. Prior to this audit, no member of the 5S team had ever met with any current or former employees of Canton Police Department, the Police Audit Committee, or Select Board. This report was provided to any member of the department and or town employees prior to April 1st, 2025. The audit team provided updates to Robert McCarthy, chairperson on the Police Audit Committee, which I believe he is Bob. And if you've ever watched those town council meetings with Bob, oh my gosh, him and his yes men. Like, it is, no, he should not be the chairperson. Our team conducted interviews with all Canton PD employees. The officers who agreed to be interviewed were candid, cooperative, and forthright. Each officer was interviewed in private with no supervisors present. No senior member of Canton PD command staff or town officials interfered or attempted to influence the information and or findings in this report. I don't know how you can say that conclusively, but the audit team operated with independence and autonomy during the audit. The audit team has extensive experience in investigative processes and expertise in conducting internal investigations, compliance, and inspection related issues. Given the interest in this audit, it is important to understand what is included as part of this audit and what is outside the scope of this audit. All right. So, things that are included in this is the assessment of policy compliance, standards of law enforcement and accreditation organizations, 2, assessment of application of policy and recent investigations. 3, assessments of written policy and protocols as applied in recent investigations. 4, presentation of findings and recommendations. Things that are not included in the audit. The audit did not go back and reinvestigate any of the cases or findings of fact. They also, things that were something that wasn't included was analysis of the evidence collected in ongoing or prior criminal cases, as well as rendering any opinion of guilt or innocence of a party. Well, are you considering Canton PD a party? I mean, they're not actually a party to the, I mean, I guess they kind of are because they're a part of the prosecution. Um, and I think you do render some opinions of guilt or innocence on Canton PD. I I think you do that, even though you shouldn't have. It talks about the review, scope, and methodology. It was conducted in accordance with a government auditing standards, Massachusetts Police Officers Standards and Training, which is post-commission standards, and Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, standards to ensure rigorous assessments of the department's operations. The assessment entailed a thorough evaluation of the Canton PD across a broad spectrum of operational and administrative areas. The audit team focus extended beyond mere compliance to encompass the department's effectiveness and efficiency in implementing policies, procedures, rules, and regulations. They state again that they rolled 98 policies governing procedures, rules, and regulations. The audit team ensured a comprehensive and unbiased assessment was completed in each section as outlined in the scope of work. For the most part, it's unbiased, not 100%. Additionally, employee interviews were conducted involving all members of Canton PD, covering leadership, patrol officers, and detectives, in addition to key Town of Canton department heads, including the town administrator, superintendent of schools, and select board members. These interviews highlighted the areas of strengths and efficiency, areas for potential improvement, and illustrated the professionalism of Canton PD officers during what has been described a tumultuous time in the town of Canton's history. That is of their own doing. This could have all been avoided. And they need to fess up and say, you know what, we screwed up. We should have done better. Like, at least say that and then say, you know, we are going to be doing these things in the future. We can't fix anything that's been done in the past, but we are going to make sure that y'all don't ever have to doubt us again because things are going to be done properly. That needs to be done. And they're just not taking any accountability. That's part of the problem. They won't admit that they screwed up somewhere. They just act like everything was fine and dandy. We were doing the best that we could. No, you could have done better. But the people in charge of certain things, they're more responsible than the lowers. But some of this stuff shouldn't have even been a thing. The audit team worked through the scope of work. Numerous findings highlighted discrepancies between written policy and implementations. The audit team has put forth recommendations in the body of the report in an effort to assist the town of Canton in enhancing policy compliance and operational efficiency. While the audit covered 20 sections, the areas of crime scene protocol, professional standards and accountability, organizational structure and governance, management, operations and culture, hiring, training and equipment, and evidence are the main areas in which the audit team identified immediate action and development items. The audit team reviewed a series of crime scene incident reports. This is evidence and crime scene protocols. Crime scene incident reports spanning over a decade. While some investigations were found to be in line with established guidelines, there were cases of policy breaches, mainly related to the use of digital photography for documenting crime scenes as required by the Canton PD's evidence collection and preservation policy. So if it's in your policy, why do they not have the tools to do so? Additional shortcomings were identified in the areas of crime scene preservation and detailed incident documentation. Our evaluation included a detailed analysis of Canton PD policy and procedures with a specific focus on evidence collection, something number 601, dated October 31st, 2013. Oh, that's the policy and procedure they were going by. This policy outlines the responsibilities of first responders in evidence collection, crime scene preservation, and documentation. Initial recommendations were for the sergeant or shift commander to take charge of the crime scene and for additional training for Canton PD personnel to handle or supervise evidence collection. During the examination, the audit team assessed the response and crime scene procedures carried out by Canton PD officers on January 29, 2022, involving the tragic death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe at 34 Fairview in the early morning hours. These actions were compared against existing policy regulations and requirements to determine compliance. The review of this major incident encompassed crime scene investigations, police reports, evidence collection, crime scene security, interviews, and evidence documentation. Policy violations were identified and are detailed both below and in the final. So, they compared their work to see if that is what their policies and procedures say that they should have done. And you should be following those guidelines. Like, it's not rocket science to at least follow rules that you know about. And the fact that some cases they followed all the rules and other cases they didn't, who were the main people in the didn't follow the rules? Is it the same officers that kept doing it? Is it everybody in the department? Is it every time one person is on the case? That would be interesting to know. And why is it followed sometimes but not all the time? Their observations and findings. First responding officers should have photographed Boston police officer John O'Keefe at the location of where he was found before fire and rescue moved him to the rescue. Yeah, because fire and rescue are on scene. They can be doing all that stuff, life-saving measures and everything. And while things are happening, they could have taken a picture of the body. Like, it's insane to me. All the interviews of critical witnesses, including Jennifer McCabe and Carrie Roberts, should have been conducted at Canton PD on January 29, 2022, after John O'Keefe was transported to the hospital. Consensual recorded witness interviews should have been conducted. They've got nothing to hide. They should not have a problem consenting to the interview being recorded to make sure they get it all on tape and everything else. The MSP, along with Canton PD, should have maintained a police presence at 34 Fairview Road pending the secondary search conducted by MSP crime scene units. All video footage files maintained by Canton PD's computer systems of Karen Reed's Lexus SUV while it was housed at Canton PD from January 29th to February 2nd, 2022, should have been requested and turned over early in the Karen Reed case to lead investigators for any action as deemed appropriate. And the thing is I believe that they did hand most of it, or I don't know, I don't think they gave it all, but they did give the video footage to the lead investigator, Michael Proctor. The thing is Michael Proctor doesn't work for Canton PD. And that's something we need to remember in this audit, is that this is an audit of Canton Police Department. This does not include Massachusetts State Police. It doesn't include Trooper Garino, Trooper Paul, Trooper Proctor, Buchanan. It doesn't include any of those people. So we need to remember that. Just if they are saying Canton PD did this or Canton PD should have done this, Canton is in these investigations. But a lot of the problems, there are some problems in Canton PD, but a lot of the main problems come from Massachusetts State Police. So let's go to professional standards, internal affairs. In evaluating professional standards and process, the audit team conducted an examination of internal affairs investigations dating back to 1991. As a result, we found that there was a lack of organization and consistency for the investigative files and for investigative efforts, particularly during the tenure of 4 different Canton police chiefs, namely John Ruin Jr., Peter Bright, Kenneth Berkowitz, who has passed away since from Karen Reed's first trial to now. Kenneth Berkowitz has passed away, and he was the chief when this happened. Then the current chief, Helena Rafferty, took over when Ken Berkowitz retired. It says we examined 75 internal investigation files over a 20-year period. These 75 actions resulted in 63 clearances and 12 acts of sustained violations. The 12 sustained violations resulted in 4 suspensions, 1 demotion, and 7 counseling and training sessions. No firing. Because why would we fire anybody ever for screwing up things? The audit team determined that post requirements were met as they were related to the inquiries and subsequent disciplinary actions. The most recent action occurred on October 2nd, 2024. 2 complaints and results were sent to post in accordance with the policy. It was noted that due to the department's size, establishing a designated internal affairs division or the designation of a full-time internal affairs investigator is not practical. The audit team found the complaint files were not maintained in a consistent manner as methods of investigation, documentation, and processes were varied. While on duty, Chief of Operations and Investigations is responsible for overseeing internal investigations. We found some complaints filed by residents and or violations of policy and procedure by officers were handed directly by the Chief of Police, creating a conflict. So their observations and findings under the professional standards of internal affairs is the Canton PD internal affairs process is inconsistent regarding investigation and documentation methods. The audit team found no instances where complaints were intentionally ignored or officer conduct was arbitrarily excused, but the consistency in how cases were handled varied greatly. And I do not know how you can say that they weren't intentionally ignored or that it wasn't arbitrarily excused. You don't know that for a fact. You're assuming. Like, and that I think that's their thing on is they're like, we didn't find anything of intention. Okay. Well, stupidity is not an excuse for bad investigations either. It's just not. You know the standards and the protocols and the policies when you take the job. You know it when you become a police officer. You know the protocols and the guidelines. Yeah, some certain things might change department to department, but for the most part, everything a police officer does is pretty much the same everywhere. In evidence collecting and documentation and reporting and everything like that. Like it's not different anywhere you go. So it's not like you have to learn these things every department. You may have to learn how they work or how they do shifts and where everything is, but you had on the job training basically when you went through the academy to become a police officer. But so that's why stupidity is not an excuse for me. Several misconduct complaints were handled directly by the chief of police. The audit team recommends hiring outside firms for internal investigations where conflicts and potential conflicts exist or cases where multiple officers are involved. Now they're going to get in organizational structure of governance. So it's going to talk about Canton PD's hierarchy framework, chain of command. Apparently, they're well defined, ensuing that communication follows the appropriate channels to reach supervisors. Information flows smoothly to necessary authorities when senior decision making is needed by bringing in additional civilian staff members, such as an intelligence analyst. The department could greatly improve communication capabilities, leading to increased efficiency and effectiveness. Yeah, it seems like everybody just goes straight to the chief of police. When the chief of police really shouldn't be burdened with a bunch of petty, low level stuff because your captains or your sergeants and your lieutenants should be handling all that. And it's not until it goes all the way up to the chain of command and it's gone from the bottom all the way up, and that person still needs help figuring it out, and then they can go to the chief of police. But the lowly Peabody patrolmen, like, no offense to them, they're just bottom of the totem pole as far as the chain of custody and command goes, should never be going directly to the chief of police. You have missed a bunch of chain of commands. And in certain places, if you do that, you can get fired, you can get written up because you're not following the chain of command. The audit team found that the Patrol Division and Investigative Division frequently collaborate on crime prevention and provide effective support to each other's efforts. Their teamwork and synchronization are evident in their combined responses to incidents such as non-fast shooting event that happened, a non-fatal shooting event that happened in November of 2024. During this occurrence, both divisions swiftly reacted, apprehended the shooter, and gathered crucial evidence, including the weapon used. Their cohesive approach involved conducting interviews, examining evidence, and liaising with prosecutors to file attempted murder charges against the offender. The unity and coordination between the patrol and the investigative divisions were outstanding and played a crucial role in the successful resolution of the case. Patrol officers are actively engaged in cases and maintain close collaborative with detective divisions. Additionally, all details and activities were promptly communicated to senior management, and town officials, guaranteeing appropriate notifications within the organization. Canton PD patrol officers were tasked with handling both 911 calls and other calls for service, dispatching calls for service to patrol units. The audit team recommends that the Canton PD should consider transferring their dispatch and 911 responsibilities to the Holbrook Regional Dispatch Center. The relocation of dispatch operations to the Wholesome Dispatch Center will not incur any expenses for the town of Canton for a period of 3 years. Furthermore, this transition will ensure the provision of services, maintenance, and upgrades to the radio communication systems, such as transmitters and repeaters, be funded by the state. A secondary option would be for Canton Police to hire full-time dispatchers to assist officers in taking calls for service, non-emergency, and emergency calls for service and other administrative tasks. These recommendations are based on best practice and are anticipated to enhance the efficiency of the Canton Police Department while fulfilling various needs. Yeah, like most departments, like they have dispatch, whether it's their own local dispatch within the police department or they have a dispatch center that they use. Most police people are not taking the dispatch calls. That is foreign to me where I live. While the department has established and implemented standards for communicating with the public regarding emergencies, the function that permits public feedback has been deactivated. This has limited the possibility of productive discussions. Some individuals in the community, along with social media influencers, have continuously targeted the police department and its personnel with scornful comments, negative personal attacks, and severe critiques, even for the most basic aspects of their duty. This has hampered efforts to establish a constructive dialogue. Well, if you have to, still communicate on your social media. Uh, the social media people in charge of our police department, where I'm at, is so freaking funny. It is so funny. They are great and they need a raise because it's amazing. And they put things out there. They keep us informed. They keep us updated. Now, if everybody had a problem with the way they were doing things, and of course, sometimes we don't always like what they do, but if Canton needed to just still keep the community updated and being transparent and letting them know what's going on, you can turn off the comments for it. Turn off the comments to where people can't comment, that they can just read the stuff so that you're still putting it out there, but people can't send you hateful stuff back until you gain more trust. But the trust was broken by Canton PD. And so Canton PD is the one that needs to fix it and build that trust back up. And nothing's going to change until they do. Observations and findings under this are the Canton PD had 3 internal affairs investigations in the past year as a result of police officer dispatcher failures. Yeah, we need to be dispatching things out. Because I've heard stories of, they're like, I called 911 or I called non-emergency. They said they were going to send somebody out and they never did. And then you have a person die when somebody tried to get help, but nobody thought to send help. Just slipped their mind. They got busy. They got sidetracked with something else. And now we have a dead person. Like, that shouldn't happen. It says no civilian dispatchers are employed by the Canton PD. And the Canton PD has only 1 part-time civilian employee. Yeah, you need to do something about that. Management, operations, and culture. The audit team observed Chief Rafferty's leadership style and found her approach and decision making abilities to be effective. Chief Rafferty is highly respected by members of the department and colleagues in the law enforcement community. There is a noticeable decrease in morale among department members, largely due to the public scrutiny regarding the Canton PD's handling of crime. Department members, largely due to public scrutiny regarding the Canton PD's handling of the crime scene and investigations into the death of resident and Boston police officer John O'Keefe. That's not the only reason. While constructive feedback is beneficial, the continuation of personal criticisms has transformed from a method for improvement to personal attacks. These attacks via various avenues such as social media, phone calls, emails, and public demonstrations have had a significant negative impact on the morale within the department. Then you should be pissed off at the people that screwed up the investigations. If you were one of the good cops in there, you should be so pissed off at these people because you got into this job, hopefully wanting to serve and protect and help community. And you have all these people screwing things up for you. And while I don't know if some of this stuff needs to be happening, you can call for the police department to do things. You can have your First Amendment. There is a bunch of people who cross the line. Um, there's people on both sides that cross the line. But the ones who did it, you need to take it because you're responsible for it. The ones who didn't, you should be pissed off that you are a part of a department because there are some people that are there now that were not there during any of this. And because they wear a Canton uniform, they are attacked when they have nothing to do with any of this. Because not everybody at the department has involvement in these cases. But if you're wearing a Canton uniform, you are treated horribly, no matter who you are. No matter, they don't have to know your name. They don't need to know anything about you. And I think that if you want to be mad at the people that screwed up, fine. The ones that are making you mad, pissing you off, whatever. But to take it out on every single person, I don't agree with that. Because while there is some slimy, no good people in departments, there are also good people in departments. Just because 5 are bad doesn't mean all 40 are bad. Social media personalities have claimed that Canton PD deliberately mishandled the crime scene where Mr. O'Keefe was found in January 29, 2022, and implied possible cover up with the department to hide the circumstances around Mr. O'Keefe's death. Following her arrest, Karen Reed and her legal team have asserted there is a conspiracy and cover up involving law enforcement and witnesses. Influential figures on social media and various regions have been tracking and amplifying these claims. Multiple Canton PD officers have stated that they have experienced harassment from the public while working, spending personal time with families and children, and during off duty police details. A gathering of individuals supporting the Free Karen Reed movement regularly protest outside the Canton PD. Well, they have a right to do that. There have been numerous accounts of officers encountering harassment both in person and online, including through emails, voicemails, social media platforms, and YouTube. Members of the audit team have received emails and text messages prompting team members to investigate allegations and alleged cover ups by police. While tensions are strained within the community, it is incumbent on the leadership for the town of Canton to remain unbiased and objective. Any lack of support from the town leadership, coupled with the vitriol expressed by some members of the public, has negatively impacted the morale of the officers. Well, y'all negatively impacted the community. The following two quotes given by two separate Canton PD officers during the interviews highlight the chasm that exists between Canton PD and town officials. It says, "No one in this town will care about us until one of us gets murdered. Even then, half the town will probably celebrate that. Elected officials don't care about us. Now, the easiest way to gain popularity or get elected is to publicly trash us. They have no political platform, just trash the police, that's it. It doesn't even have to be true, just do it." And that's where some of us need to take a reality check. Be mad, protest, scream at the top of your lungs, whatever you want to do to the people that deserve it. Not everybody deserves it. And some people will hate me just for saying that, but not every one of the 40 people that work for Canton Police Department is bad. Observations and findings. The Canton PD has above average morale as it relates to camaraderie and faith in the department. So the morale is above average and great in the department. Like everybody in the department gets along and all that, I guess. But they also said that there was low morale because of it, negative morale in the department because of the outside people. Changes need to be made. That's for sure. Interviews conducted by the audit team revealed that officers do not feel they have support of Canton town officials. Canton PD officers' morale as it relates to its relationship with the town is low. The audit team has been informed that the town meetings in the town of Canton devolve and become contentious and unproductive. That is what I'm talking about. If you've ever watched these Canton town meetings, they're awful. Mostly because of Bob. Bob plays a huge part in that. People that are like, I don't want to listen to it. You're not going to come in here and besmirch. No, you're there to listen to the town's concerns. Take the information and do something with it. Ease their concerns. Let them know what you're doing to fix these concerns. Instead, it's just, nah, 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 nah. I don't want to listen to you. You're just a liar. You're just like, listen. People are hearing, but they're not listening. And that's the problem of the townspeople and high ups over in Canton. They're not listening to its citizens. The people in your community are outraged. And instead, you just want to cover your ears and just be like, la, 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 I can't hear you. Listen. and respond. Don't react. Respond. Y'all are in leadership positions. Y'all should not be acting like children. Hiring, training, and standards and equipment. Canton PD is a civilian service department which plays as an important role in ranking and selecting new officers prior to exercising police powers in the Commonwealth. Individuals must successfully complete a prescribed course for basic police training authorized by Municipal Police Training Committee, and Municipal Police Training Committee set standards for basic police training for candidates hired by the individual police departments through the Canton Commonwealth. These police departments submit applications. They need to be 21 at least, be employed or sponsored by Canton Police Department, successfully have completed the Massachusetts Human Resources Division physical ability test and medical examination before assignment to the academy. Additional training for Canton PD officers is required. While the Canton PD meets training requirements as they relate to certifications and qualifications, our team recommends that Canton police detectives receive advanced training in crime scenes photography, crime scene documentary, evidence evaluation, and collection. Yeah, because your training apparently is not as good as it should be. Further training in crime scene management, report writing, evidence collection, expert witness testifying, internal affairs, discovery rules, and legal ethics. Additionally, officers have expressed a desire for more training, and while the command staff attempts to fulfill each request, current budget constraints prevent them from doing so. So they say that they don't have the money to do more training. It is pinpoint locations in the town of Canton where Canton PD portable radios are not functional. Yeah, you need your radios to be functionable. Given the officers are not equipped with department-issued cell phones, so yeah, you need your radios working if you're not going to have cell phones between everybody so that everybody can communicate. The scenario where a Canton PD officer may be dispatched from their marked patrol car to address an emergency situation on Washington Street or Canton Central without any means of communication is realistic and concerning. So you don't have a way to ask for backup if your radio doesn't work and you do not have a cell phone issued by the town of Canton. You can use your personal cell phone, but then now your personal cell phone has been used as a way to collect evidence, and now your cell phone can be looked through, your personal cell phone, and they can find all sorts of things in there, as they did with Proctor at MSP. So their observations and findings, detectives need advanced training in crime scene investigations. Canton PD needs an increased training budget approved by the town. Civil service standards place a limitation on who can be hired by the town of Canton. Portable radios and their inability to provide complete coverage is problematic. Canton PD officers are not issued department cellular phones. So those are the things that they found and observed. Now their recommendations are interviews conducted at Canton PD. Interviews of witnesses should be conducted at Canton PD whenever possible. These interviews should be recorded and conducted as soon as possible after an event. Yeah, not months and months and months later. If you need to bring them back for another interview months and months later, okay. But you need initial interviews from everybody. We're not doing a witness panel, which is what they did in John O'Keefe's case. All sergeant and patrol's vehicles should have full crime scene kits, including evidence collection bags, sealing equipment, and digital cameras. Department phones or digital cameras should be placed in the patrol cars for officers to document crime scenes. The audit team identified that officers and detectives use personal phones to photograph crime scenes. Patrol officers and sergeants noted that Canton PD has one digital camera assigned to the detective division. One camera in the whole department. And a digital camera is not expensive nowadays. Like, you can buy some cheap digital camera to do this with. Doesn't have to be the best of the best digital camera. You should have just a basic digital camera that you can use. It says Chief Rafferty is aware of this recommendation, is in the process of purchasing additional digital cameras for officers. Third recommendation is rewrite Canton PD policy and procedures related to utilization and authorization of personal phones to photograph or video crime scenes. All policies should be changed to mandate the utilization of only department-issued and owned phones to photograph crime scenes. Use of personal phones should be strictly prohibited. And that is something that most departments have. Do not use your personal phone. You need to use department-issued things. And it's for your protection as well. Not just for the investigation, but it's for your own privacy and protection of your non-on-duty life. Relinquish 911 and dispatch responsibilities to Holbrook Dispatch Center or hire full-time dispatchers. In the past 6 months, the audit team identified 3 separate occasions where patrol officers failed to dispatch officers to calls for service. The audit team found most neighboring police departments of similar size employ full-time dispatchers. So there are departments around the area that are about the same size as them that are doing these things already. So why are you not? Utilization regional dispatch centers. These options must be evaluated by the town of Canton as either could be alleviate overtime cost while provide an extra police body where needed. The use of regional or full-time dispatchers would allow overtime funds to be redirected towards overtime expenses incurred while attending training. Additionally, the officer covering dispatch would be available to perform police functions on patrol. Instead, if regional dispatch is the selected alternate, any expenses from the radio system upgrades and maintenance is covered by the Commonwealth. So they're saying, hey, if you do this way, then the state has to pay for these things, not you. Recommendation 5, increase training opportunities for patrol officers, detectives, and sergeants. Specific training of note include crime scene training, interrogation and witness interviews, and evidence documentation practices. Recommendation 6, Chief of the Investigation Division should review all death investigation police reports to ensure completeness, accuracy, and exhaustion of all investigative avenues. Note, a Canton PD detective wrote that Sandra Birchmore died of an unaliving in the initial report. It was later determined that she had been murdered by strangulation. Well, not according to the state medical examiner. You know, things were messed up there. Those people messed up. MSP screwed up with it too. Recommendation 7, provide prompt, proportional, and consistent discipline across the department. Discipline must be applied consistently to all employees and administered in a manner that prevents the appearance of unfavor to any employee. The audit team identified that several internal affairs cases were handled directly by the chief of police and instances where the discipline process was not always applied consistently. So basically, the lieutenants and the sergeants and the captains or whatever should be disciplining their underlings, right? The chief of police should not have to be doing that. The chief of police should be the one disciplining, like, the lieutenants, like the leaders. But the underlings, under those leaders, they should be disciplining their own people. It shouldn't be up to her. And then if there's something with it, she can look at it and do something, but she shouldn't be the one disciplining the the lowest level officer. Also, let's say that if let's an example that has happened. If you find out that an officer had been drinking and driving on the job, whatever his punishment is should be the same for every single person that gets caught on their first time. So you can't have somebody that gets fired for it on a first occasion, somebody that does it just gets a slap on the wrist, and then somebody that gets unpaid suspension, another gets paid. They all need to have the same consequence. You screw up once, this is the consequence. You screw up twice, this is the consequence. I mean, there shouldn't be a twice. Twice should be to, like, go away. And the first time to me should be go away. But you want to give them suspension? Okay. You want to take away vacation days? Whatever you deem appropriate. Every single person that's caught doing the same thing should receive the same consequence. It shouldn't be, well, you're Billy Joe's son, and so I can't give you as harsh a punishment as I gave to Jimmy. That's just not how things should go. Let's go into the background now. All right, background. In October 2024, the Canton, Massachusetts, along with Special Police Audit Committee, selected Five Stones Intelligence to conduct an independent police audit of the Canton PD. The audit took place we've gone over that, in accordance with the laws and accreditations and post standards, initiated following a special town meeting in November 2024, where residents of Canton voted to audit the local police department in response to the death of a Boston police officer, John O'Keefe, in Canton, and the police handling of the crime scene and subsequent investigation. Consequently, the Canton Select Board formed a special police audit committee to oversee the audit. The committee was chaired by Robert Bob McCarthy, with additional members including David Clough, Kathleen Howley, and Dr. Daniel Muse, and Colonel John Kelly, who is retired from the Massachusetts State Police. So it says Canton Police Department is a municipal police force in Massachusetts employing 50 personnel, including 42 sworn officers. The department is headed by Police Chief Helena Rafferty, who was appointed in 2022. Chief Rafferty, a 35-year veteran of the department and an FBI National Academy graduate, ascends through the department's ranks to her current position. The majority of the department officers operate within the patrol division, focusing on response to service calls and patrolling town streets, schools, and businesses. Then it's got a breakdown of all the people. So there are 4 administrative sergeants, 4 school resource officers, 1 detective sergeant prosecutor, 3 detectives, 1 task force officer, 5 patrol sergeants, and 25 patrol officers. There's only 1 chief of police. There's a deputy chief of administration, and then there's also a deputy chief of operations. There's an administrative lieutenant, an investigative lieutenant, and a patrol lieutenant. So it breaks it down. There's 7 sergeants in total. There's 25 patrol officers, and Canton PD is currently down 7 officers with another deployed sergeant on military leave. So 8. They need 8 more officers to do things. And some of their officers, even though they're down, are answering dispatch. That's not productive use of them. It talks about the different sectors. Um, Day shift is from 7:45 a.m. to 3:45. Evening shift is 3:45 to 11:45, and overnight shift is 11:45 to 12:45. Um, and at night, there's only 4 patrol officers and 1 sergeant. I actually have ties to one of the overnight or evening officers. I don't know if he's evening or overnight. I just know a family member of one of them. Criminal Investigation Division focuses on investigating violent offenders, serious crimes, and related offenses. It's commanded by a lieutenant detective who oversees 1 detective sergeant and 3 detectives. They perform tactical operations, serves warrant, and works in concert with Massachusetts State Police, neighboring state and local law enforcement agencies, and federal law enforcement agencies, including the DEA, ATF, and FBI. And they have 1 ATF, Brian Higgins, working out of Canton PD. Sergeant serves as the police prosecutor at Norfolk County Superior Court. They are also responsible for conducting any internal investigations or inquiries initiated as the result of a civilian complaint or allegation made by another Canton PD employee. The assignment of investigative personnel is at the discretion of the Canton PD senior leadership. Canton PD rules of conduct. Rules and regulations state in part, each employee of the Canton Police Department is expected to show his loyalty to the organization through putting forth his best effort to accomplish the department's goals and objectives. Police department employees must comply with rules and regulations set forth by the Canton Police Department and are to act both publicly and privately in a manner reflecting the highest public interest. Actions taken by an employee contrary to this paragraph shall be grounds for disciplinary action, which we know they don't really do a lot of disciplinary where they should. Um, People have been getting away with stuff for way too long. Just like sometimes when you have jobs and you have an employee that is 5 minutes late every day, sometimes 10, but they're never on time. They're never a little bit early. They're always late. And some people just let it slide. They're like, well, it's 5 minutes. They're always here anyways. But the thing is they do not show up on time. And that should have consequences if you can't show up to work on time. That's part of being a grown-ass adult. I mean, and that is what they teach you in school. When you get tardies, it's to teach you to show up on time. Even though most of the school life, it's your parents that have that control. But anyways, we're getting way off topic. But there are things that people don't get consequences for, and they should. This regulation is the backbone of Canton PD expectations, professionalism, courtesy, integrity, and the Canton PD Code of Conduct contains 12 pages and addresses pertinent issues required by commission, accreditation, and post. And they're related to such areas as professionalism when working with other agencies, dissemination of information, courtesy and respect, interaction with the public, courtesy to the public, requests for assistance, professional trust, referrals for service, discrimination, disparaging terms, prejudice, stereotyping, anti-Semitism, racism, sexual harassment, dishonesty, and political involvement. They are sworn. All employees of Canton PD, both sworn and unsworn, are required to familiarize themselves with the provisions of the department's rules and regulation. All Canton PD policies are reviewed and updated by Chief Helena Rafferty in November of 2024. Canton PD policies, procedures, and regulations are available via each desktop on the L drive under the title Canton Police Department Rules and Regulations and on each officer's cell phone via the Bluetooth voice application. So somebody could probably just read them to you if you don't want to read them. And I think people need to for now, they need to reread these. At least once a month, they should be re-gone over during a meeting or something for now. Because apparently it's just not getting through anybody's head. I don't care if they sign on a dotted line or not, they're not adhering to them. It says in 2024, the Canton PD logged 9,071 dispatch entries, of which 8,928 were police action, calls for service, or police-initiated contacts. Of the 8,928 encounters, 310 of them resulted in eventual arrest. There probably should have been more. 75 resulting in immediate arrest and handcuffing at least one defendant. The other 235 arrests resulted from indictments, arrest warrants, or surrenders. Of the 310 arrests, 37 resulted in use of force incident, representing approximately 12% of the arrests. The use of force numbers and types are depicted in the chart below. So it says 37 out of 75, 37 was use of force incidents. 38, they did not have to use of force. And that's 12% of 75. I don't know how they did that calculation. That doesn't sound right. Maybe it is. 30, 60. I don't know. That just doesn't sound right. But I don't know what they're basing the 12% off of. Or out of the use of force instances, only 12% of those were use of force out of the 37. I don't know. So that's their little pie chart. They have a picture of Massachusetts Police Accreditation Commission certification, which I think recently happened. The audit team was asked to assess the following programs, policies for compliance: interviewing witnesses or victims policy, search and seizure, eyewitness identification, interrogation of suspects policy, testifying, mental health, handling of juveniles, chain of custody, evidence property, community relations, which that's very bad right now, hit and run investigations, motor vehicle citations, protective custody, telephone and radio use, including personal cell phones, CEO notification, communication standards of conduct, command protocol and other procedures, dispatch functions, field reporting, legal processing, media and public information, bias-free policy, or bias-free policing policy, alternatives to arrest, field training and evaluation programs, in-car video recording, body cam recording, automated plate reader, duty to intervene policy, searching and seizing electronic devices, internal affairs, victim witnesses' rights, training, central records, oath of an officer, domestic violence involving a law enforcement officer, code of conduct, roll call, selection process, dispatch center and access and use policy, school resource officer, professional conduct, evidence, special operations, informants, domestic disputes, sexual assaults, dead bodies, cold cases, criminal intelligence, compliance with the accreditation standards, specified policies and procedures, officer personal use vehicles, overtime policy and adherence of the overtime policy, use of personal cell phones policy, and adherence to the policy. So those are all the areas that they were going to look at. Let's see. They reviewed various documents, which we had talked about. They conducted approximately 55 interviews, and the audit team received 100% participation from Canton Police Department leadership and the officers and detectives. Interviews were conducted, which we went over that. Assessment criteria. The assessment weighed department policies and their implementation against several criteria. Adherence, which means how well do Canton personnel follow existing protocols and regulations. Alignment, the synchronization of the policies with strategic and capital planning initiatives. Efficiency and effectiveness, the evaluation of resource utilization and goal achievement. Financial constraints, how effective the department works within the town's budgetary limitations. Compliance, which we went over that. Says findings and recommendations. Specific finding and recommendations were not applicable in all areas of the audit. Therefore, those sections will not be dissected in detail. Many of our findings assess gaps in written policy and policy implementation. Where such gaps were noted, the audit team included recommendations for enhancing policy adherence and operational efficiency. Canton PD's internal controls and compliance oversight have improved since the initiation of the audit and are functioning. And Canton PD has effective leadership in place to supervise officers going forward. Chief Rafferty has been advised of recommendations and implementing necessary changes to improve crime scene and professional standards. The methodology. It is imperative to note certain limitations to assessment when it comes to budgetary evaluations. No law enforcement or public safety policy should be limited for the purpose of operating within financial restrictions of a town. Policies are formulated to provide directives pertaining to public safety, officer safety, and adherence to best practices within the law enforcement industry with the goal of ensuring protection from and preventing of criminal actions. The notation that any public safety, officer safety, and effective law enforcement practice should be limited to adhering to financial constraints is a decision that cannot be endorsed by this audit team. Principle extends the capital planning initiatives as well. Any initiatives undertaken by town must be in line with police policies, account as for resulting budgetary requirements. These policies and standards that the Canton PD must abide by are mandated by Massachusetts state law and therefore should not be limited by financial initiatives, synchronization of services with alignment to the budgets, and a historic challenge of police professionals. They have their current certification, accredited certification, recognizing the compliance of Canton PD with the Massachusetts Police. The audit team has incorporated those requirements considering the gold standard for law enforcement agencies, the post requirements, and the Massachusetts law in our assessment. Let's see. Meticulously evaluated actions of Canton PD against established policies and procedures. Evaluation considered external factors beyond Canton's PD's control and internal factors such as training resources and staffing levels. Our observations have been documented and recommended, have been proposed where applicable to rectify identified gaps in policy, application, and compliance. When the scope of work yield repetitive findings, these were amalgamated in sections to present concise overview. The audit sought to ensure Canton PD complied with necessary regulations and operates efficiently and effectively going forward, aligning its practices with broader strategic and financial goals while maintaining strong community relationships. Given the size and nature of the request, the audit team structured this report in alignment with the scope of work for ease of review. All right, Section 1, Policies, Procedures, and Regulations. Officers must issue Miranda warnings when appropriate from Canton, specifically from a Canton PD issued Miranda warning card or documentation. Awareness of language barriers, fatigue, medications, or mental health issues affecting the suspect's ability to understand the rights waiver is crucial. Voluntary statements are acceptable after a clear waiver of Miranda rights as unprovoked, spontaneous utterances made freely without officer prompting. Conducting interviews, officers are encouraged to follow a structured approach, although the content and methods may vary based on the investigation's nature and interview subject. Proper interview techniques must be employed to enhance productivity, protect public rights, maintain professionalism, and increase interview efficiency. So that was on interviewing and interrogation of witnesses. Recommendation is the Canton PD's policies regarding interrogations and interview aligns with post and accreditation standards, emphasizing the protection of constitutional rights and promoting effective investigative techniques. However, establishing a consistent approach in conducting interviews and documentation ensures the effectiveness and reliability of the statements obtained by the department. These efforts will also support legal admissibility and enhance the overall quality of investigative work. Yeah, document that stuff properly and make it consistent because the prosecution wants to be able to use these interviews during the prosecution of said criminals. So it's very important that you do these things right so we can convict the people that deserve to be convicted and that we don't convict people that don't need to be convicted. Specific recommendations for Canton include uniform approach to documentation, implementing standardized templates or guidelines for reporting interviews, ensuring consistency in formatting, structure, and essential content. A template should be adequate to appropriately document different types of interviews, but nonetheless provide a consistent structure to be used by the department. Yeah, because there are certain things that you want to make sure that you get in every single interview. And so there are key details that we need from every single person that we interview. And that needs to be gone through. And if we need a template and a form that goes with that so you can fill it out and make sure you hit all those key points, then let's do it. Ongoing evaluation and improvement, Canton PD policies, including self-evaluation mechanisms to assess interview effectiveness and remediate shortcomings. Commanding officers must consistently review the reports of the subordinates, ensuring effectiveness and thoroughness. The officer in charge of the investigations unit should review any interviews deemed inadmissible in court or in cases where prosecution is declined. Such a review will identify shortcomings in the report so improvements can be implemented appropriately. Yeah. Say, hey, this little thing that you did here, let's not do that again. Or I wish you would have asked a further question, right here. Um, or, hey, you forgot to do this. And maybe it's also with their decorum and stuff in there. Separation of suspects during questioning. Very important. We do not panel witness statements. We do not do a panel voir dire of our witness interviews. Separation of suspects during it. When conducting interviews on multiple individuals, interviewees should be separated from each other prior and during questioning. It's so that they cannot collab on stories. They can't come up with their stories. They can't say something, like hear something that another person said and then add it to theirs or change their testimony or what they know is true to fit in with that. We need them all to be individual because then we have a collective narrative from everybody. And all the things that everybody pretty much from all these separated witnesses, you can get the story. But if you give them time to work off of each other or collab on their stories to get their stories straight, then we've got a problem. You need to be separating the witnesses and suspects. It's a key factor in corroborating statements from multiple individuals. Training and policy amendments. Where deficiencies are identified, amendments to existing policies should be made and additional training should be provided to ensure the changes are noted and understood. Yeah, it's one thing to be like, yeah, okay, I know that's there. But you need to make sure that they're understood, and being complied with. That's your job as like the supervisor. Is you're supposed to be leading these people below you. You're supposed to be checking them on things, making sure they're doing their job correctly. And the person above you is checking you. So somebody always has a check from somewhere to keep you in line and make sure you're doing the right things. And constructive criticism and corrections are necessary. B, evidence search and seizure, electronic devices, and chain of custody. So, key policy areas that were reviewed. It talks about search and seizure, chain of custody, evidence handling, seizing of electronic devices. Let's see, chain of custody emphasizes use of computerized records management. Critical details recorded include location, date, time, personnel involved in each transfer, ensuring continuity and accountability. Yeah, who touched what, when, where, how. Evidence handling. Differentiates between temporary and permanent storage solutions to secure evidence. Temporary evidence room includes lockers, shelves, and secure containers for immediate deposit. Permanent evidence room, highly secured long-term storage with rigorous access control monitored by 24-hour video surveillance. So that's something that we should have. Who is going in and out of that evidence room where the evidence is being stored? There should be access key logs to show who has been in and out of it. There should be video of who has been in and out of it, who takes what, who touches what they do with it. But we don't have any of that in the Karen Reed, John O'Keefe case. Prohibits unauthorized storage of evidence outside designated areas, preventing mishandling or loss, such as the clothing and the solo cups. They were in unauthorized storage areas, which caused mishandling of evidence. Managed by the designated evidence property officer who is accountable for the integrity of all evidence. Yeah, who is that person? Do we know who that person is? Seizing electronic devices. Electronic evidence, cell phones, computers, tablets should only be seized if consent was provided to download and search the device. It is anticipated that a search warrant will be obtained to search the device. And that is the thing with the Karen Reed case, is Proctor ended up with it. So Canton didn't actually seize that phone. Karen Reed's phone was not seized by Canton. But you can search it if you have permission, if you have a search warrant, or you know that a search warrant will be obtained. Canton PD policy calls for all electronic devices seized to be shut off, switched to airplane mode, and sealed in a Faraday bag, preventing the reception transmission of EMF signals altering the contents of the device at the time of seizure. So how you collect it is how it should stay. Nothing should change on it from the time it is collected until the time it's given back. It needs to be in the same state that you gathered it in. No updates, no incoming texts that were not on there before. Nothing new coming into that phone from the time you collected it. Because you have it from the time you collected it and things that have happened before that you're allowed to look at. You don't get access to anything afterwards in that phone because there shouldn't be anything else coming into that phone if it's in airplane mode. Roles: evidence property officer responsible for maintaining control over all evidence, ensuing proper storage and processing procedures. An impounding officer, the initial officer collecting the evidence, starts this chain of custody. Confiscation property, items seized not directly related to evidence of a crime scene. Examples are firearms not involved in a criminal case, which are to be secured in the department armory. Affiant, sworn officer or detective that provided information under oath to the court magistrate or judge to obtain a warrant to search or seize evidence. Below is the summary of the audit team's evidence storage, strict video monitoring. Evidence documentation is maintained in an electronic log controlled by town administrative levels. Access main evidence vaults is restricted with detailed entry logs maintained electronically. We should have all that. More that they found was surveillance footage of evidence access areas can be reviewed, but not altered by either the primary or alternate evidence custodian. All sworn officers have electronic card access to temporary evidence holding and processing rooms, which is under 24-hour surveillance. All evidence brought into the station after hours for submission into evidence is logged and then deposited into a secure temporary evidence container pending final processing by the evidence custodian. Once evidence is secured in the temporary evidence container, the only person that can retrieve the evidence are the Canton PD evidence custodians. So you say now. What if they're not actually logged? Because there is no logs for the Karen Reed's case, John O'Keefe. None of his stuff was logged. It wasn't put into a temporary evidence, nothing. They did not handle that properly. I do not care if it was intentional or stupidity. Inspection, inventory, and audit of evidence room in consideration of the commission of the accreditation things. Standards, the audit team inspected temporary storage, the evidence room, and the evidence currently being held by the Canton PD. In addition, we conducted spot checks of random evidentiary items upon arrival in November of 2024. This review determined that Canton PD is in compliance with policies and procedures as recommended by the accommodation standards. Note, Chief Rafferty provided the audit team with the 2022, 2023, and 2024 yearly audit of the evidence rooms, which covered the inspection of all seized money, narcotics, firearms, sexual assault kits, and property evidence. Okay. So they know how to do it. They just didn't do it in this case. Okay. That makes it worse. So in the 22, 23, and 2024 audits revealed that the firearms were being stored along with other evidence in the main system. While not a violation, a recommendation was in alignment with best practices to separate firearms from traditional evidence. Yeah, you should have those locked up even more so than regular stuff because we don't need anybody coming in there and knocking something and something happening, even though I don't know if they empty them out or whatever, but a lot more can happen with firearms than a t-shirt that you collected. The audit team confirmed that the recommendation made from the previous October 2024 audit had been adhered to and implemented. All firearms are now stored separately and secured in a separate area in the evidence room. And that's my point is, yeah, by the time that the audit came in, they already had an accreditation commission people come in. And so they were able to fix certain things before this audit even got there. And they're going to try to be on their best behavior while they're being audited. It's when they're thinking they're not being looked at is when you need to pay attention. The evidence room was recently reorganized into 5 different areas: narcotics, firearms, sexual assault, property, and alcohol. So there were 5 different sections. In February of 2025, the audit team conducted a second audit. The audit was unannounced and included a review of randomly selected part of the evidence room. And in contents, the audit team requested the production of randomly selected pieces of evidence spanning multiple decades and types of cases. The Canton PD was evidence custodian, immediately located, produced all evidentiary items requested, which were properly secured and maintained. It's not a surprise when they're still under audit. Like, they're still going to be on their best behavior. Like, they're not going to start screwing up during this time period. So, and I don't care if it was unannounced, they still knew they were being audited. It is important to understand that there is not a policy that can tell an officer what will be classified as evidence. The collection of evidence depends on the type of investigation and the role of the investigative. Supervision, experience, and discretion are key to correctly identify evidence in the investigation. The goal is to be thorough and fair while minimizing the impact to the lives and rights of the public. An officer cannot simply take everything and sort it out later. The seizure of property has a direct impact on civilians, and what officers chose to seize must be considered to have immediate evidentiary value. The Canton PD policy delineates the difference between the handling of drug evidence and non-drug evidence and includes separate processing procedures for gun evidence adhering to the accreditation standards. The Canton PD procedures and policies as they relate to evidence handling have been found to be consistent with those standards of property and evidence control. The Canton PD's policies on search and seizure and evidence handling emphasize accountability, security, and adherence to a legal standard. Yeah, as of October. The integration of technologies such as IMC, which is an enterprise software platform and comprehensive surveillance system, demonstrates an effort to ensure these practices. Where were these practices in 2022? Why is there no log? Who is the evidentiary custodian? Where were they when John O'Keefe needed them? Because we haven't heard from the evidence custodian in the case. The department does not allow unauthorized storage and tracks all evidence interactions. I'm glad they do now. They didn't. Overall, the Canton PD demonstrates a commitment to best practices in law enforcement evidence management, ensuring both legal compliance and the protection of evidence integrity through the process. I'm glad they're doing it now, and I hope they don't ever screw up. And this was a very huge lesson, but it was at the expense of a Boston police officer where you had to learn these lessons. The recommendations. All Canton PD sergeant vehicles should be equipped with digital cameras for photography and memorializing the scene, specifically the acquisition of evidence. Further, this equipment standard should be required by policy. All evidence should be photographed at the time of seizure and by detectives and captured on a body-worn camera by patrol officers when possible. These photographs should be entered into evidence as separate exhibit and their acquisition documented in reporting of events. The Canton PD was found to be in compliance with evidence procedures during annual announced audits. The audit team recommends that leadership of the Canton Police Department conduct unannounced audits with both the evidentiary custodian and the alternate evidence custodian at different times. Doing so will ensure day-to-day operations remain in compliance with policy and requirements. Additionally, audits of this nature confirm that both the evidence custodian and his alternate can locate and retrieve exhibits in correct manner according to its policy. Like, you should know where this stuff is. You shouldn't have to hunt for it. When somebody says, "Hey, we need this piece of evidence," it shouldn't be like, "Well, I don't know who had it. I didn't touch it. Was there a log? I don't know." Like, that's how the John O'Keefe one went. As recommended in Section 2, Crime Scene Protocol Overview, patrolmen and responding detectives should attend a crime scene preservation class. The Canton PD may only process minor crime scenes, but the ability to memorialize, preserve, and maintain the crime scene until a processing unit arrives is crucial. Minor crime scenes may eventually become major crime scenes in the event of a later discovery and relevant evidence. All Canton PD marked units should have a crime scene preservation kit, crime scene tape, scribe equipment, etc., and evidence collection kits in their vehicle. All sergeants and detective vehicles should have full crime scene kits, including bags and sealing equipment. Make sure you got some gloves in there too. So yeah, I'm glad they're prepared for it now, but it should have been done before, because these are basic things. Like, this isn't rocket science that you needed somebody to come in and tell you to do this. You knew it already. Eyewitness identification policy. So blind administration with lineups, sequential presentation, one at a time rather than all at once. Use of fillers, carefully selecting non-suspect participants in lineup, fillers who match the description of the perpetrator to ensure fairness. Yeah. If there's a person and they know it's a dark-haired person, you can't put a bunch of blonde people and then only one brunette person. Like, that you think the perp is. Like, that's not been an issue in this thing as far as these eyewitness identifications. That's not really big in the cases that we're talking about currently, but all right. Comprehensive instructions, documenting identifications. They don't have any recommendations, so they're apparently doing that correct, which we didn't have anything on that. Testifying, which lots of them have been doing recently. Based on review of Canton PD policy, testifying in court, which was revised on January 1st, 2024. The audit team noted Canton PD practices adhere to professional standards and expectations when testifying in court. Presenting evidence in the court is a crucial step in criminal cases, marking the culmination of police efforts. The effectiveness of this presentation hinges largely on the competency of the officer testifying. No matter how thorough the investigation work leading up to the court appearance, a weak, incomplete, or unsatisfactory testimony can undermine it all. And I'm going to say Trooper Paul. You could have all the evidence in the world, and if you have Trooper Paul testifying about it, it's going to undermine all that, because that poor boy sound like a dodo bird. A D. Like, yeah, he should never testify again. Like, or he needs to go to some advanced training classes, because, like, in person. Like, he don't need to be doing online classes. He needs to do in-person stuff. The court evaluates not just the quality and quantity of the evidence, but also how it's delivered. The officer's demeanor, appearance, attitude, and the ability to articulate clearly can heavily impact the credibility of their testimony, shaping the trial's outcome significantly. Yeah, you need to be able to tell the jury in clear terms. You need to make sure that they understand what you're saying. You need to be professional. You do not need to have a smug attitude. You just need to be testifying to, like, these are the facts. Like, this is just what it is. You don't need to be combative. You don't need to do any of that. Just, this is the evidence. We found it here at this time. We did this and this and this, and show that everything was done correctly. But if you start getting combative and smug and your ego comes off as a certain way, or you come off as a jerk, it's not great. And then also you need to be knowledgeable about what you're testifying to, because you're the one that did that certain thing. And so you should have knowledge of it. You were the one that was there doing this, handling this evidence or handing it off or collecting it. Like, walk us through it, like you were telling your kids. But if you sound like you have no idea what is happening, like you sound like you weren't even around or did anything, you just came in to talk about something that you weren't even a part of, is how some of these testimonies have come off. And I think it's because of distancing, but it sounds like y'all act like none of y'all were there, like doing any of this stuff, that everything was just reported to you. And you're just repeating that stuff, but you're not speaking from actual knowledge. Doesn't seem like you've familiarized yourself with everything. Like, those are things that are very important to cases. Um, Despite personal investment in the case, officers must strive to present facts objectively during testimony. It is paramount to avoid both downplaying and exaggerating circumstances to maintain impartiality. Yeah, you're just up there to say this is what I did. That's it. Like, that's all you need to do. That's what you're there for. I collected this sock and it was in this spot. It was about 2 feet away from the couch. It had a little blood on it. We sampled it with a Q-tip and sent the blood sample off to the lab, or we collected it in its proper evidence collecting way, and we just sent the sock, because it was a small item, to the lab for DNA testing and so forth. Like, just talk about what the thing is. You don't need to do anything more. Just get up there and tell the truth. No more, no less. Navigating the legal complexities of a criminal investigation and prosecution demands collaboration between police and prosecutors. Each party contributes unique skills to the prosecution team, while police relying on prosecutors for legal expertise and prosecutors relying on police for investigative expertise. Trials serve as a learning opportunity for police officers, allowing them to refine their skills and their approach to future cases. Yeah, you can learn a lot about, oh man, I should have done that, or oh, we did do that, or make sure that I put that in my notes next time. Yeah, you can learn and grow, become a better officer. So the recommendation is the audit team has certified that the Canton PD policy regarding court testimony is clear and encompasses the requirements for successful testifying at trial in alignment with the best standard practices. So it quotes, every court appearance should be a learning experience for a police officer after every trial, especially if the case is lost. The officers should go over their testimony and the evidence with the prosecutor and any other officers that were involved in, to learn further about the strengths and the weaknesses in the case so as to improve the prosecution of the next case. Any objective or points of law that were raised during the trial that the officer does not understand should be clarified. I agree. Because sometimes the police do certain things, and the prosecutors have to be able to prosecute somebody based on evidence that police did. And if police don't do their jobs, it makes it harder on prosecutors to get the bad guy, to seek justice, which it doesn't seem like is happening in Canton all that much, but that's what it should be. We want to make sure we do things right. And how can we make the prosecution's job easier and covering all our bases for what they need? And if it's not there, it's not there. But if it is, make sure you do those things. With that directive as guidance, the audit team recommends training on testimony clarity, which is our team recommends training to improve officer skills in understanding questions during their testimony. Yeah, because a lot of that was like, can you rephrase? I don't understand. Like, sir, have you never testified before? Accurately and professional answering questions establishes credibility and clarity for the officer and the information presented by the prosecution. Additionally, professionalism in testimony limits the cross-examination perimeters of the defense. Yeah, prosecutors don't want to give the defense any more than they have to. So if you can just, answer certain questions and don't go into a narrative or answer anything other than that question, then it makes it a little bit harder on cross. Handling disagreements professionally, officers should understand that it is okay to disagree with counsel, and it can be accomplished without being confrontational. Yeah. Understanding how to maintain composure and professionalism, even if the question becomes challenging, personal, and contentious. Yeah, you got to go up there and you got to take it from the defense team. And they're going to be poking at your ego. They're going to be making you feel like you're horrible at your job or that you're a liar. The defense is there to check you. And if you've done what you're supposed to do, there isn't much the defense is going to get out of you. But if you didn't do things you were supposed to do, the defense can tear you apart. So it's important to not get into an ego match. Don't take what the defense is doing so personal, even though it comes off as very personal. Like they're telling you you're bad at your job, basically. Identifying assumed truths. Training should include techniques for identifying and addressing assumed truths within questions. This skill helps officers provide accurate, precise answers, ensuring that the testimony remains consistent and credible. Exposure to high-profile cases. Given the challenges that arise from limited exposure to high-profile cases, Canton PD should consider mock trials or role-playing exercises in conjunction with district attorneys' office as part of their training to simulate the pressure and the delivery of accurate testimony. And defense attorneys do this all the time. I don't know if prosecution probably does too. And it's like, listen, they're going to get up here and they're going to tear you a new one. And you have to make sure you don't lose your temper. You don't lose your cool. Stay calm and just answer the questions. Because if you let it get to you, it's not going to be good for you or the side that you're on, basically. What you're fighting for is not going to get accomplished. Continuous skill development, regular workshops, and refresher courses should be implemented to ensure officers remain up to date with best practices in case law in the courtroom testimony. Training sessions can be conducted in conjunction with the prosecution's office and administered with limited expense. By focusing on these areas, the Canton PD can enhance the effectiveness and reliability of its officers' testimonies, particularly in high-stakes legal environments. Okay, and then they go over mental health. The recommendation is on mental health is budget allocation should be considered by the town of Canton leadership. Canton PD should work with town officials at various levels to secure funding for a full-time MHP position. Should the grant no longer be available, the loss of this position could create significant negative impact on the town of Canton and surrounding communities. So funding a full-time mental health professional, basically, because police officers have a high unaliving rate, high depression, a lot of them. They see a lot of stuff that other people don't. Sadly, they should never even have to see this stuff, but it's the world we live in. Handling of juveniles. Um, Juvenile is anyone under 18. Under 12 cannot be charged with a crime. What? That's interesting. You can't be charged with a crime if you're under 12 there? Preferred method to bring juveniles to court via summons unless there is a good standing belief they will not appear. Arrest warrants issued if there is a reason to believe the juvenile will not respond to the summons, has not appeared as summoned, or violated probation terms. And it goes through all the different things above handling and supervising juveniles. The recommendations are the guidelines reflect Canton PD's emphasis on minimizing coercive actions and ensuring protection of the rights of juveniles during their interactions with law enforcement. And we've seen a lot of people minors that get questioned without their parents there. They don't know all their rights. And they can do a lot because a lot of juveniles are like, oh, police are good, they're authoritative, they can do things, I should just cooperate and do what they want. And some people don't realize the police can lie to you. They think that they can only tell you the truth. And kids need to be talked to about this. Even if you have a good kid, like, you need to make sure your kids know that if for some reason anything ever happens to you and you end up in a situation, this is what you need to do. Careful attention is paid to specifics of juvenile detention, rights advisement, and the appropriate handling of each case to align with legal and departmental standards based upon the serious nature of handling juvenile offenders properly. We recommend the Canton Police institute an annual training to be attended by all sworn personnel concerning handling of juvenile offenders. It is further recommended that officers certify that they have read and understood the corresponding policies related to the same. Yeah, they need to remember that you have to handle juveniles a lot different than you do adults. Community relations. Let's see, what else? Audit team reviewed Canton PD's community relations policy as described in the rules. Emphasizes the importance of ongoing community relationships program to ensure effective communication between Canton PD and Canton citizens regarding department activities. The goal of community relations program is to involve the public in problem solving and planning in cooperation with the department. Specific points of consideration include public perspective on new and old Canton PD courses or programs, as well as alternatives to ineffective or unproductive policing practices. This policy allows Canton PD to retain a position for a community relations officer to serve as a liaison between the department and the community with the goal of identifying community concerns, because you are there to serve and protect your community. The supervisor staff meetings, the chief of police will request information on current community concerns, potential problems they have with law enforcement activities, and recommendation actions addressing previously identified concerns. Canton PD officers are required to report any public concerns of urgent nature to their immediate supervisor upon gaining knowledge of the situation. Such situations include potential racial unrests, potential labor management conflicts that could result in violence, etc. The information shall be passed to the chief of police, who will develop a plan for an appropriate response. The chief of police will seek feedback from the community relations officer annually regarding overall department performance, overall competence of the department officer's attitude and behavior towards citizens, concern over safety and security within the community, and any recommendations or suggestions. And the thing is, right now, is the attitude and the behaviors of officers towards citizens is horrible right now. I don't know if it's Canton officers or if it's just Massachusetts State Police, but the people working in and around Norfolk County that have badges, y'all have got to do better. Y'all need to quit acting like a bunch of hard asses and earn the trust and respect of your community back. The recommendation is, considering the current political climate and current state of the public's trust in Canton PD, any adaptations to this policy should be conducted as a joint effort by the Canton PD administration and town selectmen. I wanted to make sure that we touched on this hit and run investigation because technically, in the case of John O'Keefe, they are basically saying that Karen Reed hit John O'Keefe and ran. So it was a hit and run according to the Commonwealth. So I want to look at what they're supposed to be doing during these things and see if they did adhere to these things. The audit team conducted a review of Canton PD's hit and run investigation policy of rules and regulations. The policy states the objective of a hit and run investigation is to determine responsibility for the collision and to identify both the offender and the vehicle involved. The policy directs duties for both on-scene response and follow-up investigation following a hit-and-run incident. So, key policy areas they reviewed. On-scene duties. The policy states that the officers responding to a hit-and-run should first make provisions for medical treatment of the victim if necessary. Okay. They did that. The officers must follow up on the condition of the victim after he or she is transported to the hospital to ensure appropriate charges are filed, including motor vehicle homicide, if it appears the victim may die or has died. Officers should obtain the best possible description of the operator of the vehicle from the victim and witnesses. Important observations include vehicle make, model, year, color, extent and location of damage, license plate, including partial numbers or letters, unusual markings or equipment, direction of travel before or after the collision, number of passengers, if any, and their descriptions. Okay, we don't have location of the damage. That was come up with a long way later. Because even when she was arrested, I believe for murder too, it wasn't because of a hit and run. It was because they thought Karen beat him up or something. And then later it became a hit and run, is what they accused her of. So it's very weird. Any descriptive information obtained shall immediately be communicated to dispatching officers. Officers should search the area around the scene of the crash, including the automobile or pedestrian which was struck for physical evidence. Note, the policy makes a point to note that in the event a pedestrian is struck and injured, the officer should ask the hospital, if possible, to secure any such evidence which may have been dislodged from the victim's clothing during transport. That was not done here. John O'Keefe's clothes were just thrown on the floor. Further, officers should request hospital personnel to give them the victim's clothing and any associated paint chips or glass fragments to the police. There was none of that done here. They gave him actually, they didn't give him the clothes. They just went and picked him up out of his room. Like, nobody gathered his clothes. They just were like, okay, here's John's room. Let me just grab these real quick. Photographs and measurements should be taken at the scene when required at the direction of a shift supervisor or detective on scene. Why did nobody tell anybody to take measurements? Officers should examine the person and the clothing of the victim for evidence, particularly traces of the vehicle. If necessary, an officer may take and preserve articles of clothing and other samples of evidence, such as hair or blood. Well, they took some hair, all right. The hair that survived a blizzard. Officers should be observant for potential persons to be interviewed in the area of the scene. Where appropriate, officers should conduct a door-to-door canvass of residents and businesses in the vicinity of the hit-and-run scene. There was no canvassing done. Just the guy across the street who was also a police officer, who gave them the solo cups and the Stop and Shop bags. A preliminary search for the suspect, car, and driver should be conducted as soon as possible. Notification of subject and vehicle description should be made to all police on patrol, state police, and adjacent police departments via the radio network. If motor vehicle homicide charges are being considered, the chief or the chief designee may decide to contact the media to enlist the public to aid in locating the suspect, vehicle, and driver. Well, they supposedly knew who the suspect was. They knew who the driver was, supposedly. They knew where the vehicle was that morning. And if she said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, why didn't you take her there? Why didn't you collect her vehicle then? Because she didn't say that. And there's no proof anywhere that she did say that. Other than people saying they did it. A bunch of he said, she said stuff. Which is not evidence, in my opinion. If a reasonable effort to apprehend the offender is unsuccessful, officers should communicate such dispatch and return to regular patrol duty unless directed otherwise by the proper authority. Yet they didn't have to go searching for Karen Reed, even though they're like, well, she went to her parents' house. Well, let's see. Her boyfriend just died. The parents are not liking her right now. And so she's grieving and a mess. And she can't go back to where she was staying. I mean, she could go home, but she just lost somebody that she's been with for a while. So maybe she wants to be comforted. She wasn't fleeing. Like, she came back. They did a thing on her. They even had her on a psych hold at the hospital. Why didn't they take her then? Like, they let her get out of the hospital. I'm sorry, if you thought she did this and she admitted on scene that she hit him, why wouldn't you arrest her at the hospital? Like, it makes no sense. Y'all did not think this was a car accident or a hit and run. Follow-up investigative protocols. The policy states that an in-depth or follow-up investigation should be conducted upon the direction of the detective sergeant. The follow-up investigation, if any, should include the following types of activity: records check for stolen vehicles, communication of relative information regarding the vehicle and driver to nearby departments, a second search of the accident scene covering a wider area, repeated visits and surveillance of the scene at the same time of day during which the accident occurred, and visits to local establishments where the vehicle may be located for service, car washes, auto shops, etc. If the vehicle involved in the accident is located, it should be carefully examined. Specifically, dents and body damage should be measured as to width, depth, and pattern. Photographs should be taken if possible. You know what they didn't do to Karen's car until 3 days later? They did not do any documentation. When they picked it up, they didn't document a thing until later. Obtained samples of paint chips, broken glass, pieces of clothing, dirt, evidence of blood, hair, flesh, etc. Well, there was no flesh on any of this stuff. There was no blood on the car. There was a single piece of hair. No paint chips. There was some scratches. There was broken glass on the bumper that didn't match anything at the scene. There were pieces of clothing that were put into a bag with taillight pieces, so those aren't accurate. Because if they were put in separate bags and collected correctly, and it had taillight pieces in it, that would be more believable. But when you put the taillight pieces and the clothing in a bag together, you cannot know if those were there prior or if those were there because they were housed in the same bag. It's tampered, contaminated evidence, whether it's on purpose or not. Inspect the interior for personal articles which may identify the offender. Observe and note any signs of recent repair or any broken or missing parts. The policy is careful to note that the above steps should be taken in accordance with the department policy and procedure. In the event search warrant is sought, the vehicle should be kept under surveillance until a warrant is obtained. The identity of any person attempting to enter the vehicle or destroy evidence should be established. Unless they mess with the surveillance video and they chop it up. If the operator of the suspect vehicle is located, he or she should be questioned promptly, following Miranda procedures if applicable. Finally, the police requires that any hit-and-run accident reported with personal injury with a suspect or with damage of approximately $1,000 or more must be followed up with a full and complete report, including details about the accident and the particulars of any follow-up investigation. Findings. The relationship of this policy as it relates to the events of 34 Fairview is relevant only through hindsight. At the time Canton PD responded to 34 Fairview in the discovery of Boston Police Officer John O'Keefe, Canton PD did not know they were responding to the scene of an alleged hit and run. Okay, they didn't know when they were responding, but once she supposedly said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, you did know that you were responding for that. So you don't have an excuse. The call for police came in as a complaint reporting an unconscious male discovered in the snow. Canton PD initially prepared for an unattended death and subsequently investigation by the MSP. Their recommendations are follow the policies of the Canton PD manual as appropriate to hit and run scenes. I don't care what you got dispatched out for. People get dispatched to an accidental fire all the time. And then when they get on scene, they realize it wasn't an accidental fire. It was a cover-up fire. It was a murder, intentional fire. But just because they weren't called out for it doesn't mean that they can't do things while they're there to adjust it. You can't be like, well, this was called in as an unattended death, so we have to treat it as an unattended death. Even though we have evidence that shows it's a hit and run, like we can't change gears and adapt when the narrative changes. And the reason you didn't adapt and think that it was a hit and run is because there was no confession. Because otherwise you would have changed the way you were investigating. But you didn't. And being inept is not an excuse for bad police work. This, if you want to stop and read, is about motor vehicle citations and protective custody. And so if you want to pause and read it, you can. There's no recommendations under this from them, but if you want to pause it and read it, you can. Telephone and radio use, including personal cell phone. So they conducted a comprehensive review of the regulations and policies concerning these things, and it is mandated that all employees, specifically officers, must possess a cell phone through which the department can reach them. So it doesn't say a department-issued phone, it just says they have to have a cell phone. And the department needs to know a number in which they can contact you at all times, I'm guessing. So if you change your number, you have to let them know if that is your main line of communication. And that, let's see, they confirmed that the use of personal cell phones by Canton police officers at a crime scene is permitted only as a last resort. Well, if they don't have any other way to take pictures of things, there's only one digital camera in the entire department, basically. So basically, last resort is every time. Whoever's in charge of that digital camera every shift, then I guess they should be dispatched to every call, so they don't end up in this situation. But, that doesn't happen. So then it says, when personal phones are used in such instances, they are subject to potential seizure as evidence. Yeah. And so the Canton Police Department is putting their own officers at risk for their phones to become evidence and to be seized. And then they have to go out and buy a new phone because it's now evidence in a case. Like, it doesn't mean that every time an officer's phone is confiscated as evidence that there's going to be something bad in it. If you're conducting yourself professionally, then you should have no worries, but like, they should be able to keep their personal stuff private. But you're forcing them to forfeit their right to privacy when they have to use their cell phone. Now, if they choose to, knowing these risks, then that's on them. But when you're kind of forcing them to have to do it because there's no other way, that's on you, Canton PD. But it says officers should opt to use department-issued tablets, laptops, or digital cameras when at a crime scene instead of a personal device. I don't know if people's laptops are taking pictures. Now, if you have a laptop that can turn into a tablet, maybe. Laptops aren't usually taken, like, for picture taking. In that aspect, like reverse camera. But tablets definitely can. And if everybody has a department-issued tablet, then yeah, definitely use that instead of the phone. That should be a no-brainer. But I don't know if everybody has an a, an issued tablet. I don't know what they have in their vehicles. It says primary mode of communication for officers receiving radio calls through Canton PD radio system, a computer-based platform containing multiple channels that enables simultaneously communication between officers on different channels. It operates 24/7 and allows officers to communicate with dispatch, other officers, and other patrol, their counterpart from fire and rescue, and neighboring police departments. Handheld radios with attachments are utilized when the officers are away from their patrol cars. A thorough examination of the system monitoring logs spanned from 2020 to 2024 revealed no significant issues or outages concerning the radio system. Well, that's good. The town of Canton has enlisted the expertise of telecommunications system specialists, referred to as the resident IT specialist, responsible for troubleshooting, maintaining, and overseeing radio equipment, mobile data components, and communication radio rooms. The specialist adheres to preventative maintenance approach, conducting routine inspections, repairs as necessary, ensures regular upkeep of portable radios. It remains unclear whether the repairs are handled in-house. Why is that unclear? Like, that should be something very easy to verify, but okay. It says they conducted an inventory of all the portable radios and found that all were properly accounted for in inventory. During the interviews with sworn officers, the audit team discovered that the town of Canton has several areas within the city limits where the portable radios do not have any reception or transmission capabilities. So when they talk about from 2020 to 2024, there were no significant issues or outages. That's not necessarily true if you have officers telling you that there are known areas where this happens. These areas, specifically along Washington and Neponset streets, are in the center of town. Lack of reliable communications in the areas creates a serious safety concern. Yeah. What if there's a shooting over there and you have an officer down? That officer can't even request backup or help because there's no reception to talk to anybody over there. It's very unsafe. If there's an active shooter and you have a civilian that went down, nobody to come in there and back you up. You got to walk away from it and get back into an area of service. Definitely not okay. And if it is known about, it should have been being fixed. Their recommendation is the use of personal cell phones to conduct official police business be prohibited immediately. Stop letting people use their personal cell phones. Nobody should use their personal cell phones while on duty or when they're doing casework. The audit team further recommends that the issuance of department-owned cell phones to all sworn officers, or have one for each vehicle. That it's like, okay, this is patrol vehicle 10's phone. So whoever uses patrol vehicle number 10, this is the phone that they're going to use. If it is not feasible to issue sworn officers' cell phone, phones should be issued to officers of rank or sergeant or higher. And they just they're going to have to go to these scenes. Phones for patrol officer use could be issued to department and signed out at the beginning of each shift. Another option is to purchase individual phones to be assigned to each of the patrol cars, which is what I said. Under no circumstance should a sworn officer use his or her personal phone for police business. I agree. The areas that do not provide reception or transmission capabilities for the portable radios must be addressed. Yeah. That needs to be addressed. This is a serious safety concern for officers that could place the town in a legal liability situation should the officer fail to have radio communications. Yeah. A failure in communication could result in injury or the inability to radio for medical services for a member of the community. Multiple officers notified the audit team that they were concerned about the portable radios not working properly in certain areas of the town. The audit team spoke with information technology specialist who is aware of the issue. Okay, they're aware of it. Why aren't they doing anything? All right, and then they go into CEO notification and things that need to be, the chief needs to be notified immediately on, and then things that they can just later be noticed on. You don't have to contact them immediately. You don't have to contact the chief immediately. And it should not be the patrol officer contacting the chief. It should be the patrol officer's supervisor that then reports it to another supervisor and then reports to the chief. Or you can say that any office, like any supervisor, can relay it to them. But it needs to follow the chain of custody. I don't know if it needs to play telephone that many times. But if it's written and documented during the time contemporaneous, then it won't be a game of telephone that many times, but there's ways to do it. It needs to be outlined clearly. They have a recommendation that officers follow department policy given the political climate of the town. Considering the size of the department, we recommend the deputy chiefs and chief be immediately notified at all significant events listed above, including those events that allow for delayed notifications. They go over communication standards of contact, finding. A notable incident occurred in 2024 when a veteran Canton PD police officer failed to notify supervisors about a restraining order situation at an early childhood education center in Canton, leading to a child abduction incident. I beg your pardon? What? Despite being informed by school representatives, the officers did not communicate this critical information to its superiors or patrol officers. Consequently, the child was abducted by the subject of the restraining order. Canton PD immediately responded to the abduction, issued a statewide alert, and collaborated with law enforcement in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, to apprehend the perpetrator. Chief Rafferty took appropriate action by suspending the officer for 3 days due to failure to comply with departmental policies and procedures on departmental communications. So, okay, let's see. So they're supposed to communication policy states that all employees must promptly, accurate, and comprehensively transmit official communications to other officers and promptly notifies officers in charge of critical police-related matters. They're required to inform relieving officers of any unresolved or potential issues for the next shift, like a briefing. Nurses do it too. Needs to be accurate, promptly. Clearly convey. Okay. So there was a 3-day suspension for this dude. While most officers Canton PD adhere to communication protocol, this incident underscores the consequences of non-compliance with the department policies and the importance of timely and accurate communication with law enforcement. So did he just forget to forward information, or like what happened here? Because that's sad. Like, that's traumatizing for that child. Uh, Despite the initial failure in communication, the Canton PD responded effectively once the issue was known. And implication, the result of the audit in the above mentioned incident can be used for training and practical improvements within the department, which is true. Like, where there's failures and then you find out you had a failure, you can discuss those failures and be like, okay, this can't happen again. We need to make sure that we all know what we should be doing. Because even like doctors do that at hospitals. They'll take cases where somebody died or something went wrong, and then they talk about it and how to improve it or to avoid this happening next time and figure out what they can learn and do better on. Like doctors do that in hospitals all the time. Recommendation, continuous education of the importance of communication practices should be implemented to prevent similar lapses in the future, considering hiring full-time dispatchers to work alongside officers to take emergency calls and non-emergency calls, evaluate other services needed to dispatch officers for calls of service. And I think this is one that somebody that was taking a dispatch call and then they forgot to send officers to where they were supposed to. Like, they got sidetracked because they needed to pee or something. I don't know. It's ridiculous. Incident analysis. Specific breakdown in communications to be analyzed. Understanding why the officer failed to act according to policy and to improve training and protocols accordingly. Ensure clear consequences for not following the policy to reinforce the seriousness. Yeah. Because these are the mistakes that police officers cannot afford to make. And I get people make mistakes, but sadly, when you work in careers where you can't make mistakes, it's not good. You kind of just got to take your lick and move on. Post-incident evaluation should be conducted to assess the effectiveness of implemented changes after such an event. Consider additional support or backup systems to prevent single points of failure in communications, perhaps through technological means or by ensuring multiple people are made aware of the critical information as it occurs, limiting the possibility of communication failure. It is essential that policies are not only well written but are effectively communicated, understood, and followed by all members of the police department to maintain high standards of community safety and trust. It talks about command protocol and order of precedent. There's no recommendations there. They talk about dispatch, and their recommendations for dispatch functions is no on-site corrections were reported, which suggested the department's communication center is operating according to established policies and procedures. Let's see. Operations and highlight areas of strength and areas of potential improvement. So it is essential to address data retention, retains recordings of communications from various sources, including hard lines, radio, security cameras, booking rooms, cell recordings, 911 calls. It is important to prepare for the upcoming expiration of the free recording service agreement and plan for retention of these recordings in the future to avoid data loss. Yeah. So that it's not like, well, it overwrote. You should have backups to save and preserve the data, which they have issues with. Civilian dispatchers, additionally, as well as mentioned in this, recommends the addition of a civilian dispatchers to work alongside with the officer. Sergeant and patrolmen are assigned to work dispatch on each shift. That should not be a thing. Civilian dispatcher can handle the majority of the calls while referencing the institutional knowledge of a sworn officer. They think that 2 should be hired. Yeah, so the other officers can actually work as police officers and not dispatch. All right. Field reporting. Basic types of reports and the requirements. Incident reports. Needed for certain police responses, some requiring detailed narratives. This classification is used as a catch-all and can document everything from a response to a call to the observation of an officer. If you need a template, use it. Arrest reports generated by personnel responsible for or participating in the arrest of an individual and documenting the who, what, when, where, and why. Complaint applications, motor vehicle crash reports, required under defined situations. Field interviews, created and updated as necessary and covers both witnesses and suspects while you're out on the field. And then citation entry, required for issuing any motor vehicle citations. Do your reports. Do them. Try not to make errors in your spelling, your grammar, and your sentence structure. Simple language should be used when necessary. I think that a lot of it needs to be typed. Thankfully, most of it is nowadays and not written, so handwriting reading is not an issue like it used to be. Their recommendations. In line with the recommendations made in the interrogation and witness interview section, the audit team recommends Canton PD must standardize their report writing requirements and institute a required format with minimum standards and expectations. Yes, so that somebody is not writing like 3 sentences and another person is writing 2 pages on the same thing. Like, it's ridiculous because you did not answer all the questions and give all the details in 3 sentences. While not all reports will address the same areas, a consistent format should be implemented for reports reflecting consistency regardless of report's author and the author's position. Fields that are not applicable can be marked as such. Uniformity and consistency are required in report writing to establish and manage expectations and to ensure completeness in reporting. Yeah, put NA on a section that maybe is not applicable. Let's see. All arrest reports should contain a section entitled Use of Force. Considering the statistics provided in this report, we know 90% of the Canton PD's arrests do not involve use of force. Statistically speaking, in 90% of reports that recommend use of force section would read use of force none. Yeah, or have it like a box that you can check off. Documenting a negative in a situation is very important because it hinders a defendant or a defendant's attorney from later claiming that an improper use of force was used while affecting the arrest. Consistent and complete documentation to include negatives lead to greater credibility when testifying and minimizes questions regarding content. And one of the big things is, like, if they would have searched 34 Fairview, the defense could not sit there and say you didn't even search 34 Fairview inside the house. Defense can't make that argument if you actually do the thing and then you report on it. If you have a chain of custody and you know where that evidence was from the time that you got it to the time of trial, defense can't argue those things. These are simple things that you could be doing that would make a defense team's arguments less. It takes away a bunch of stuff when you do your job correctly. They talk about legal process, summons, subpoenas, arrest warrants, search warrants. There needs to be documentation and such. It talks about media and the public. It does say that let's see here. Practices. Talks about people, advises he's been managing the social medias since this time. Talks about what types of social media they have. In regards to Instagram, they blocked public comments, which is fine. You can still keep your community up to date and not allow them to say anything online. That's okay, because if you're still posting and you're doing things, it's at least showing that you're being transparent. And then once they think that you're being truthful and honest and building that trust back, then maybe you can turn your comments back on and start having fun with your community again. So it just goes on about more about that. Don't really care about that much. Then it talks about the different platforms and recommendations for that. Transparency and community engagement are critical components in modern policing and can foster trust and cooperation. Allowing public to post comments can often provide valuable feedback. And I get that if you just monitor them, that's one thing. But if you're not going there to say something constructive and you're just personally attacking, it doesn't get anybody anywhere. Like, you can post that they're POS somewhere, but I mean, right now I can understand why they would have comments turned off. But it's their fault that they're having to do that. Bias-free policing from race, gender, age, reason for interaction or stop. The program protecting against bias is robust. Public forums are always recommended for community feedback. That is their recommendation for that. Alternates to arrest. Their recommendation was We strongly recommend officers default their actions according to the documented laws and departmental policies. Any discretion utilized by officers expose both the officer and the department to allegations of misconduct and prejudicial treatment. Therefore, the recommendation of the audit team is to enforce the laws as written. Yep, no favoritism. But we know that there is favoritism if you have McCabe or Albert last name. It talks about field training and evaluation. They need to have some exposure and do some programming and training. They talk about in-car video recording. Talks about body camera recordings that this needs to be done. We know they have some. Well, no, we know that Massachusetts State Police has them. Don't know about Canton. But Massachusetts State Police has them, and they pick and choose when they are using it, which should not be a thing. They recommended that the department should purchase additional cameras to be placed in areas where traffic is heavy near schools and other heavy populated areas within the town. Oh, that's for flock cameras. Never mind. They didn't say anything about body-worn camera. Duty to intervene. That's talking about if it is mandated that if an officer witnesses another officer using physical force, including deadly force, that is deemed excessive or not objectively reasonable, given the circumstance, they must intervene to hiate the use of unjustifiable force. Intervention should not take place if it puts the officer or another individual of immediate harm and risk. Says they don't find any information on it. That could be because they're all. It could be that it's not happening, or if it is happening, it's back the boys in blue, and we're not going to say anything. So it could be. There could be many reasons why there's no evidence of any of that. But, yep. And then it goes over informants. More information on informants if you want to pause and read it. Also, remember the PDF of this will be in the description box below if you want to read through. Domestic disputes is the same thing. If you want to pause and read. We're going to skip down to dead bodies. Classify a death into one of four categories: manner of death, homicide, unaliving, accidental, or natural. It is vital to act promptly and knowledgeably in response to the discovery of a dead body, adhering to established protocols or policies. As per Massachusetts general law, individuals must notify the police chief medical examiner under various circumstances such as deaths involving criminal violence, accidents, unaliving, suspicious circumstances, abuse suspicions, poisoning, or drug-related deaths, among others. The responsibility of establishing the cause of death falls under the jurisdiction of the medical examiner. Cause of death is specific injury or disease that leads to the death, while determining the manner of death generally lies with the police. So, let's see. Oh, cause of death falls under the medical examiner. The manner in which the death happened lies with the police. So what caused the manner in which it happened comes from the evidence. It says the manner of death is determined of how the injury or disease leading to the death occurred. The medical examiner takes charge of the deceased body and any personal property found, unless the property is considered evidence of a crime scene. It talks about unnatural deaths, including potential evidence, notes by the unalivers, unless directed by the DA's office, is essential to maintaining the integrity of a crime scene and handling deceased persons' belongings with care. In incidents of an unattended death, falling under criteria of the Massachusetts general law, both the medical examiner and district attorney's office must be informed. However, in attended deaths where the cause appears natural and non-suspicious, the medical examiner may not need to be present at the scene, provided a death certificate is signed by an appropriate individual. Unattended deaths procedure requirements immediate action by responding officers, including initiating resuscitation if applicable, and notifying the necessary authorities. The scene should be secured. Yeah, that didn't happen. And efforts made to preserve any potential evidence until the arrival of the medical examiner and district attorney representatives. That was not done in the John O'Keefe case. Alrighty. So now they're going to go over a little bit of John O'Keefe's case. Overall, the handling of deceased individuals requires thorough adherence to statutory provisions, careful documentation of the scene, cooperation between law enforcement and medical examiners, and proper notification of relevant authorities following established protocols. The audit team reviewed policy and procedure, evidence collection, and the preservation of evidence related to death investigations to include the death investigation of Boston police officer John O'Keefe. We made observations and recommendations listed below. Our team made additional recommendations and findings which are detailed later in the report. See below. First, responding officers should have photographed the scene. The location of Mr. O'Keefe before fire rescue arrived. The Canton PD properly notified the Massachusetts State Police. However, MSP were not decisive in their response to the notification. Pending MSP acceptance, it is Canton PD's crime scene and should have been handled as such. Yeah, you can't just be like, well, MSP is coming, so we just sit here and twiddle our thumbs. The arriving Canton PD units were properly equipped with crime scene equipment, allowing for proper crime scene processing, evidence bag, digital cameras, collection kits. Oh, they were not properly equipped. They didn't have the proper things to do anything with this crime scene. Canton PD should have maintained a presence with at least one patrol officer and marked patrol unit at 34 Fairview to preserve the crime scene pending further investigation by MSP. This is one of those things that if they would have had an officer there at the crime scene and didn't leave it unattended, guess what the defense doesn't get to argue? That you left the scene unattended, that anybody could have messed with it. It was not secured. If you do that, it's one less thing the defense gets to argue. But you basically are handing them a defense on a silver platter when you don't do your job. It's important to note or acknowledge that despite the challenging blizzard conditions and delayed response from MSP, the Canton police officers made an effort to uncover and protect evidence. Did they? The innovative use of a leaf blower to systematically search through the snow covering crime scene was instrumental in uncovering evidence near Mr. O'Keefe's body. You know what it didn't uncover? Taillight pieces. So I don't know how innovative it was. Like, do y'all have heaters to melt the snow? Like, okay, maybe a murder doesn't happen all the time in Canton. Like, great. That means it's a safe place to live. It does not mean that you shouldn't know how to do it if it ever happens. Like, you should still know how to deal with it. But do y'all not have to collect evidence in other things when it's snowing? Like, do y'all not ever have to preserve evidence or a crime scene in snow at all? Or just in the winter when it snows, just no crimes take place at all? Because just saying that there are murders don't happen often there, that doesn't mean that you don't deal with things, other crimes that are in snow where you'd have to preserve evidence. So it's a BS excuse, in my opinion. Considering the delayed arrival of MSP and the absence of crime scene equipment on hand, the Canton Police Department officers were resourceful in their attempts to safeguard physical and biological evidence. Okay. See, this is where you're taking a biased opinion, in my opinion, where you're like, we're not going to come to any conclusions. You just did. And I think in one of their presentations, like last week, they said that Alaska uses the leaf blowers on their crime scenes. I don't know. I just don't think that it is something that you should use. But y'all don't know what y'all are doing out there, so I guess it just didn't work well for you. Were resourceful in attempts to safeguard the March 20th, 2025, at approximately 5:28, Canton PD responded to a report of an unconscious male who was believed to be overdosed. When officers arrived, they were met by calling party who discovered the male subject in the doorway to the house. Canton PD officers observed the male subject laying on the floor in front of the doorway. Officers immediately secured the scene and notified Detective Sergeant and other detectives who responded to the scene. Canton Fire Department and paramedics responded on scene and pronounced the male subject deceased at 5:35. Notifications were made to MSP detectives assigned to Norfolk District Attorney's Office and the Medical Examiner's Office in conjunction with Massachusetts law, who then responded to the scene. Prior to their arrival, Canton PD took digital photographs of the scene. Did they take them with digital cameras or phones? Secured evidence and obtained witness statements recorded on body-worn cameras from individuals at the scene who had critical information. The investigative action was in line with Canton PD policies and procedures and best practices. The Canton PD noted in reports that the manner of death was sudden death overdose. These actions demonstrate that the audit team's recommendations related to crime scene preservation and handling are being successfully implemented and making effective changes in the operations of Canton PD. Well, I'm glad they're doing something now. But this is stuff that should have been going on the entire time. But if they can keep doing this, they might be able to earn the trust. I think you need to get some of the bad people out, but with some new people who are not a part of all this nonsense, your department can have hope in the future. It just sucks that the reason all of this is happening was due to a police officer's life lost. And I don't understand why it takes something happening for things to be improved in some of these things. These things should not be like, oh, maybe we should have done this at the cost of somebody's life. So the recommendations are scenario-based tabletop training in a classroom setting during in-service training. They can simulate a variety of crime scene scenarios. Moreover, their scenarios should include detective division as well as third-line supervisors to illuminate the communication process and expose possible gaps in current procedures. I can see some of these cops being like, that's stupid. Like, we're gonna role play. Like, we all know what we're supposed to be doing. Why can't we just go out there and do it? Why do we need to do this stupid stuff? Like, I can see people acting like that. They also, it's recommended for standard, I cannot talk today, standard evidence collection equipment in their patrol cars to handle and process crime scenes, including dead bodies. The Canton PD's officers will be the first responders and should be equipped to adequately secure the scene and pertinent evidence until MSP arrives. As the first responders, Canton PD officers should receive training on evidence collection and preservation relevant to crime scenes involving dead bodies in the event that the MSP response is not timely to prevent the erosion of pertinent evidence. And anybody that does not want to do these training courses or these role-playing exercises or any of this extra training that y'all are going to be required to do now, y'all should be pissed off at the people that caused y'all to have to do all this. Like, because just doing it regular, you know, here and there, once a year or whatever. But the thing is that they are having to do all these different things like bam, 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 bam. One after another, after another, after another. So it's just a lot instead of it just being dispersed in here. Um, they're having to do a lot of extra stuff that they didn't, some of these officers didn't need to do and they didn't want to do. And it's keeping them, away from their families even longer because they're having to go through training for somebody else's screw ups. Not saying they don't all need it, but like, I know some people are probably like, oh my God. If Chris Albert wouldn't have even been involved with this case, like, we wouldn't have to do all this stuff. So I don't know why Canton Police Department officers are not like, oh my God, Chris Albert. Really, dude? All right, then it talks about cold cases, criminal intelligence. If you want to read it, you can. The recommendations on that. Internal affairs. Let's see if they talk about anything juicy. Talks about how they should handle things. That is a protection of everybody. Talks, 'cause, 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 I didn't really have any recommendations. I've got some recommendations for internal affairs things because I don't think they're being done fairly. Victim witness rights, um, which are rights afforded to victims, witnesses, and family members, states in part for victims and witnesses to be provided with information by the prosecutor as to the level of protection available and receive protection from the local law enforcement agencies from harm and threats of harm arising out of their cooperation with law enforcement and prosecution efforts. Let's see, they got recommendations. What are the recommendations? 2 occasions, the Canton PD responded with threats of witness intimidation and took appropriate actions as dictated and required by Massachusetts general law. The audit team reviewed both of the police policy, I'm getting those words mixed up. One of the more in-depth investigations and found in both instances that Canton PD acted within the policy within the best interest of citizens of town of Canton. Those investigations, while required by law, did not concede with the public opinion and have been scrutinized on social media. These 2 instances cited above were just 2 of many incidents reviewed by the audit team that qualify as witness/victim harassment or intimidation. But are they actually witness intimidation, or is it just people being babies because their feelings are hurt? Audit team recommends that Canton PD enforce all laws as applicable and as cited in the Massachusetts General Law chapters, regardless of public sentiment. Well, yeah, you should follow the law, um, no matter what, but let's not be little bitches about certain things either. If there is true harassment, intimidation, like I will off you if you don't do this, or I'm going to do this to your family member if this, or I'm going to beat you up and I'm going to hunt you down. Like, maybe don't do that. And if you're doing that, you need to stop. This is where they're talking about Turtle Boy, in my opinion. I think that's what they're talking about. Even though you could say that there are people that are high up in that town that are also intimidating witnesses. Like, seriously? Like, it doesn't need to be double standard either. It needs to be equal across the board. But it isn't. They go over training and central records. More records. And then the oath of an officer. If you want to pause and read, you can. It goes over the oath of the office. It goes over the mission statement. It also goes over the code of ethics. While no recommendations are being made under this section, the audit team has observed the Canton PD officers demonstrate a notable commitment to their code of ethics by continuing to perform policing duties despite the perception that they have limited support from members of the community and elected officials. Then they talk about domestic violence involving law enforcement officers. They continue with that. Code of conduct. There are recommendations regarding the process and the documentation of both civilian complaints and internal affairs investigations. And they cover that in another area. The roll call policy, selection process, dispatch center and use policy, and they're talking about they need to hire dispatch. Okay, so then they go to school resource officer. These are very important. Some schools have to have more than one, but each school should at least have one. Sadly, you need it in elementary school too. Let's see what they talk about. Their recommendations is currently one officer is assigned and responsible for covering 3 elementary schools in the town of Canton. Nope. There needs to be one at each of those elementary schools. While the officer excels at coordinating his presence at each of the schools and varying his whereabouts unpredictably, it is logistically impossible for him to be in 3 places at once, is what I'm guessing. But yeah, there needs to be one for each. And if you hired a full-time dispatcher, that lets 1 or 2 people, those could be used as school resource officers or an extra traffic patrolman somewhere you need. Like it frees that up. So that needs to be fixed. Y'all are down 7 officers as well. Anyways, get somebody in here. These kids need protection. They deserve it. They're continuing with the recommendation. Of course, it said, they can't be in all 3 places at once and that they need one assigned to each of the school, which is what I said. They talk about professional conduct. They're expected to maintain professional uniform appearance with cognitive public perception. They have a right to privacy in their off-duty conduct to the extent that it does not affect the employee's ability for fitness for duty. To keep from unbecoming conduct. While examples of unbecoming conduct are not explicitly outlined with the policy, it is defined as a catch-all provision, including conduct that is such nature that would alert a reasonable employee that their conduct under the circumstances would be inappropriate. The provision exists to note the importance of employees understanding that their connection to Canton PD does not stop while on duty, but continues through their personal life. Therefore, Canton PD employees must refrain from conduct which tends to indicate that the employee is unfit to continue as a member of the department, or it tends to impair the operations morale, integrity, reputation, or effectiveness of the department or its members. So let's talk about officers drinking and driving. We shouldn't do it while you're on duty. But conduct unbecoming of an officer could also be drinking and driving on your off day. That is conduct unbecoming of an officer. I mean, nobody should do that no matter what job you have. But people that are higher up in towns or wearing a badge or a robe, or have to go by professional ethics standards, you understood that you were going to have to do these things when you took that oath. And if you can't do that on and off the job, then this job is not for you. They're expected to avoid all situations where conflicts of interest exist, both in fact and appearance, keeping in mind the position of the public trust. Then there is a guide as provided concerning situations giving rise to conflicts of interest. Canton police officers must avoid memberships in organizations that would intervene with the performance of their duties, as well as associations with persons who they know or should know are under criminal investigation. Yeah, if you know that, like, if there is an organization called the Canton Cartel, as a police officer, you should not be a member of the Canton Cartel because um because the Canton Cartel, if there was one, would be investigated and being looked at and under criminal investigation in the department. Because what department is not looking at different cartels? So you do not need to be involved with organizations that are under criminal investigations and that you know are not legal. Policy reiterates that Canton PD employees are prohibited from seeking undue influence, buying, selling, or receiving anything from complainants, suspects, defendants, witnesses, etc., or making any arrangement that permits a person from escaping penalty for wrongdoing. Like those nasty officers. I'm not saying this is happening. Well, we can bring Stoughton into this. We'll talk about Stoughton. If a Stoughton officer was like, hey, if you do this for me, I won't give you a ticket. Uh, Doing nasty stuff. And then the officer gets their jollies and then that person doesn't get a ticket. Well, that's not legal and you can't be doing that. Another one is like the Michael Proctor situation, which he is not Canton, he is MSP. So he is not included in this audit where they were like, oh, he wants to give you a gift. No, there's no gifts. Unless you're gifting something to like the whole police department and you're like, you know what, I just had some cookies, I'm going to just drop them off here. Or here's a bunch of thank you cards. Like stuff like that. But you can't be like bargaining and stuff like that. The inference of bias and favoritism, you can't have that. Employees may not use department letterhead for private correspondence, nor use the department mailing address for private purposes without permission of the chief. Chief of police must approve an off-duty employment. So if you need to go work at D&E Pizza, Chief Rafferty, as of right now, or whoever the chief of police is in the future, has to say, okay, you can go work at D&E Pizza. Officers must abide by Amanda's Law, which prohibits taking or transmitting images of crime scenes by first responders. Yeah, you can't be sending crime scene photos back and forth to people. Professional conduct policy strives to ensure Canton PD officers are conducting themselves in such a way as to perform their official duties in a manner that demonstrates respect and earns the public trust. And they talk about special operations. If you want to read that, you can. Compliance with certain things. Personal vehicle use. Overtime. Um, use of personal cell phones. No, they just had something there. And then they go over that they're allowed to do this. It's an alarming practice that has become routine out of necessity. They don't need to be doing it. And then they go over who should be issued department phones and stop using your personal phones. Let's see. Let's see. Following a meeting between Chief Rafferty, Select Board Chair Michael Loughran, and the audit team, it was recommended that all the Canton PD officers should be equipped with department-issued mobile phones. As a result, in January 2025, Chief Rafferty issued mobile cellular phones, Apple iPhones, specifically for the Detective Division. A new policy was implemented to ensure that only department-issued mobile phones are used to photograph evidence at crime scenes, in accordance with the policy, which states that digital cameras should be used for this purpose. The audit team interviewed department employees who stated that they often utilize personal phones or laptops to photograph crime scenes. The audit team recommended that all Canton PD sergeant vehicles should be equipped with digital cameras and mobile phones be issued to all Canton PD officers. And that might not be in their budget, but there are ways that you can do things to make personal cell phones not a thing.